Now I want to turn to Gaylord Gill and Randy Bosscher, and they're going to talk about their build along of the Bar Mills One Kit. Gaylord?
Thank you, Jim. Everybody able to see the slide?
Yes.
So we are doing tonight. 2 weeks ago, we talked to you with our part one of our intro. If you missed that, you can go on YouTube and get the recording of it and see what we covered. We essentially covered what the project is and what the contents of the One Kit are. We asked you when we left last time, think about what you would like to build with the Bar Mills One Kit, and suggested that you could go ahead and order your kit if you're going to participate with us. And Randy and I would invite any questions or issues. If you want to put anything in the chat, if you've looked at your kit, have a question about it, or if you're having any difficulty getting your kit ordered. We've talked to a couple of friends that got really quick turnaround with their orders. We'd like to take a really brief survey of the folks that are on right now. This is non-binding. We're not going to take names, but we would be interested to know by scale how many folks think that they might actually go ahead and do this kit build with us. So I'm going to turn off my screen a minute, ask if you just would hold your hand up. Any end scalers that are going to participate with us? How about HO scalers? Any that are going to join in? S scale. I know a couple of my buddies were talking about it. Just a show of hands if you think you're going to participate. And O scale. Great, appreciate it. If you think about it later and you want to send us a note, we've got email addresses we will give you at the end of tonight's presentation. I am going to turn the mic over to my partner, Randy, and he will get us going on tonight's agenda.
Okay. Tonight, we're going to discuss how to draw up plans for your structure. And the reason basically for drawing up plans is going to allow you to determine what approach you want to take. And therefore, you're going to be able to determine what additional materials you're going to need. Excuse me, I'll move my screen here a minute. So once you select what you build, most of us will be working from photos. Two basic approaches. One would be typical of the building that Gaylord showed you last time. That would be to accurately model a prototype structure. And that's going to have some effect on how you determine dimensions and so forth. The other approach is a little bit more open, just basically using the photo as more of an inspirational aspect. So in creating your own design, if you start with a simple sketch, we'll see a couple of examples of that later on. Low freehand stuff, doesn't require a lot of artistry or whatever. Oftentimes, if the building has some complexity, I'll start with just drawing cubes, stack them together till you get kind of the look or the flow that you're looking for. So in creating these different structure types, if we look at the rectangle, example would be, again, the prototype building that Gaylord showed you. Now the rectangle, obviously the rectangle is a simple approach, but again, I'll remind that a lot of times you can add the necessary texture and interest and so forth, based on additions and so forth. In fact, if you drop down below that where it says addition, the additions are just a way to bring this thing to life, liven it up a little bit. You could add on, as you see in the illustration there, it could be a shed roof, could be a gable roof perpendicular to the other. We're talking porches, dormers, entryways, shelters over entryways, recessed entryways, and so forth. L-shaped, hey, it's just two rectangles, shouldn't be too hard to figure that one out. Non-rectangular, I'm going to say if you're new to this, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a starting point, but it's certainly worth the extra challenge if you happen to have a space on the layout that just doesn't fit. You've got two spur tracks separating from each other, and you got a triangular space in there, that type of thing. So it's worth the work. Okay, why do a scale drawing? Or let me rephrase that, why do a scale drawing? Sketches and so forth are good, but at some point you have to turn this from a two-dimensional drawing to a three-dimensional item. And you're really gonna have to need scale for that. After all, that's where the kit designers started, as you see. It worked for them. So in the process of doing this, though, you're going to, as you sketch, you'll work out conflicts that you find. You'll figure out how to do these things on paper before you waste materials and have to do it over again. You can learn to work out details, like how do the corners fit together, how does this roof line work with that part of the building, etc. You'll also mentally assemble this thing as you go through it. And again, hopefully you find what are the orders that you need to do. How do you put a corner together? Let's say there's 4 components in the corner. You can put them together the hard way or the easy way. So you want to think that stuff through in the process of this. And then, of course, as I said before, it's also going to help you determine what extra materials you need. But you got to have scale dimensions. Next sketch. Okay. So scaling dimensions from photos, most of the time, whether, again, you're doing a prototype or just a generic building of some sort, you're pretty much going to want to have photos to work from. Now, the approximation approach, that's could probably just as well be called close enough or looks good. Can you back that one up there, Gaylord, please? Okay, let's see what we got. Copier scaling, one-time ruler, and calculations. These basically go from the what I'll call quick and dirty versions to the most precise way, roughly from top to bottom. So, okay, the next slide, we talk about these different methods. Scaling the method from the photos, we can do, whoops, we got, oh, okay. I'm sorry, let me back up here. Approximation. Let's just say that for generic structures, this works pretty well. You can guess at the overall dimensions. But in the process here, we need to keep the proportions consistent. The scale from a photo, though, let me see, I lost my place here. Sorry, guys.
Am I going too fast for you?
No, I just lost my spot. I had a brilliant method of keeping track of this figured out, and I just screwed it up. All right, so if we're working with generic structures, you don't really have to have a lot of precision. We're talking here like maybe warehouses, workshops or light manufacturing type of things. when you work on this, are we on page 8 here?
I moved on to the second method, Randy. If you want me to
Oh.
back up, I will.
Okay, no, you're all right. So when you start a sketch, I think you want to estimate dimensions as best you can. And you need to then make adjustments as you go. Again, if stick a couple of generic building types that are similar to what you want to do, just tack those up somewhere. And when you look at them, you can then make adjustments in your sketches until it looks right. You know, generic building doesn't mean you can draw a cartoon. You know, it still has to look like a building. So, and if you have the kit, by the way, there's a couple of thoughts. You can use the kit walls themselves. Flip one over backwards and do some light pencil sketches on the back of it. You can use those to take measurements. After all, they already figured this out for you. You know, what looks right or what scales together. Even take the wall piece and stand it on your sketch pad and use the bottom of it to, you know, make tick marks where the walls are excuse me, where the windows are going to fall, where the doors and so forth, you know, kind of get you a start. They did this already for you. So. Now, another thought, if you have the kit, if you have access to a copy machine, flip a couple of those things over so the scored side is down, shoot some copies. Now you got something that you can sketch on, or you can cut them up. If you want to stick them on a piece of cardboard, you can even use it to mock up your intended building. So. Okay, so moving on to a slightly more accurate, well, actually probably considerably more accurate. We're going to use a copier in this case. So you print out a reference photo, take the copier, trial and error technique, adjust the photo to show the structure in your scale. Now you can get fairly close on this with a little practice right from the start. Let's say your photo, if you pick on a door and it's a ½ inch tall, then look at your building scale and it says that same door should be about 7 feet tall. And you know that you have to scale it up at about 150%. So generally you can get it to the point where you just take, you know, 2 or 3 tries to get the thing pretty accurate. But once you've done that, then you can use your modeling scale to take dimensions directly off of the building. Next. Okay, last time, the one we just talked about, basically we made the photo match your scale. In this case, we'll make a scale to match the photo. So you print your reference photo out, and we've been picking on exterior doors because they're generally prominent and we know roughly what size they are. So if we take this door and, you know, just draw a center line through the door and then extend the height, you know, the top and the bottom, the height of the door over to the white part. This is easier, by the way, if you just stick a piece of your photo on some white paper. And once we have those lines laid out, find a division on a scale. It's irrelevant what the division is. You just want to be able to find, in this case, 7 segments. You can see how you lay it on there, a 0 mark on the bottom line, 7 on the top. When you have this done, take and draw the line. By the way, if you have a long enough ruler, keep that line going on up past the top blue line. You'll see in a minute. Now, when you have the scale on there, at each division point, at each segment, make a little tick mark and make that tick mark perpendicular to the scale. And once you've done that, remove the scale. Oh, by the way, you can make some tick marks on above that upper blue line. You'll get a longer ruler that way. Okay. Once you've done that, extended all of those lines over, as you see in the photo, you generated a little ruler over there. Now in this particular building, the location of that door and the door itself is kind of a busy spot. So you could actually just make another vertical line. If you go to the right of the photo, but in between that and the ruler, the scale, draw another vertical line and cut that out. So whatever works best for you. So, okay, so I'm going to move on to another method that gets a little bit more complicated, but it's worth it if you're doing a particular prototype building and want the most accurate measurements.
Thanks, Randy. I'm going to pick it up from here because this next one involves math. So bear with us. Again, if we go a little fast here and you aren't able to catch it on the first pass, go on and take a look at the YouTube later on, and it's all going to be recorded for you. Once again, we start out with a printout of the photo. We're going to again pick a door that we have a pretty good understanding of its prototype height, 7 foot door. And we will actually measure that off the photo. In this case, we measured it at 3/4 of an inch. We are going to calculate a ratio of the prototype dimensions to the photograph's dimensions. And that ratio will be helpful to us for several further calculations. So we convert our 7 foot door to inches, 84 inches. Our photograph says it's 3/4 of an inch. We divide the prototype dimension by the photograph dimension, and we come up with the ratio, which is covered up on my screen, probably is on yours. Let me see if I can move this over. Let me flip to the next page. I think it's 112. Yep, 112. So with that ratio, that's going to be consistent throughout this photo. Only going to work on this photo, not maybe another view that you're going to work from. But if you now measure another key dimension, certainly we would want to know the width of the wall. I measure that on this photo at 1 11/16 inches. So if I take that, convert it to a decimal, multiply it by that ratio, I get 15 feet 9 inches is the prototype dimension of the width of that wall. I then use whatever scale I'm working in to create a second ratio that will tell me that in HO scale, that's 2.17 inches is the width of the wall. And I can go on and use that same ratio, those same types of calculations to get the height of the wall, size of the windows, even the size of the blocks that make up this structure, which might be useful in a later view. So those are 4 different approaches. These are not real rigorous approaches, but they are all useful. We'll just caution you that some photos are more challenging. The one we showed the example before was fairly easy because it was a straight on view. But often you're going to find this situation where the walls are angled relative to the camera. Finding a door might be a little difficult. In this case, yeah, there's a door, but there's maybe a transom in there. We're not exactly sure where just the door part starts and ends. You can use one of the men in this photo, but we need to be careful which one we select. If you pick the gent in the foreground here, you can see how much physically taller he appears because he's standing probably 15, 20 feet closer to the camera than the other guy. Well, that's not going to be very helpful when we're trying to scale out this wall. So I would pick this gent because he is closer to being in the plane of the wall. So here's a summary for scaling from photos. Gather as many views as you can. You certainly want to help yourself as much as you can by looking at finding all the views you can. Measure objects in the photo, but remembering that each photo, because of the angles, because of the distance from the camera, may require a different ratio or a different one-time ruler. But here's some suggestions of lots of different things you might see in a photo that could help you as a reference point. Try to work in the same plane as possible as the wall you're trying to measure. Use other clues such as the spacing between floors. So let's just talk a few minutes about drawing our scale drawings. We want to typically start with a plan view. This is the bird's eye view, the footprint. Use your dimensions you've come out with or that you've proposed for your project. Is this going to fit your available space? If you're fitting this onto your layout, certainly want to know that up front. And will the kit's walls work with the lengths that you are working with? At least the S-scale version, the kit wall is 40 scale feet. If your building's longer, you're going to need to figure out, do I need to combine a couple of wall lengths? How do I deal with that seam? Start to think about what foundation you'll put underneath. Draw the front elevation as if you're standing out on the street looking at the front of the building. Check your window and door placements, and now you're going to start comparing against what the one kit provides. Remember, there are etched guidelines on the back side of the walls. Ideally, you'd like to be able to use those pre-etched guidelines. That'll be the fastest approach, but maybe they don't work in your case here. Maybe you're trying something different with your structure, and that's okay. You can cut new window openings, but the benefit of the kit is that the etched lines will give you a good starting point. Figure out what the window heights are that you'll need. If you recall, each of the windows has 5 what I call knockouts. You can cut out as many of those as you want for the height that will be right for the structure you're building. And in this case, now look at the heights of the kit's walls and make sure they will fit with what you want to build. Don't forget that the gabled ends, the peaked roof of a gabled end is also going to need that same siding material, and you have to allow for that as well. And finish up with the other views, the other walls. Add up the lengths of all the walls. Make sure that you have enough for the kit, enough of the kit's walls to make the perimeter of your structure. Add up the windows and the doors. You'll find the windows and doors in this kit are pretty generous. You will likely have some left over of those. Doing your drawing, as Randy alluded, you don't have to, some folks are very comfortable with doing just freehand sketches, but you do want to lay out the dimensions that you're going to be using so that you, again, can figure out how the kit's contents will work for you. You might do a more nicely drafted view as the one Randy did here. He also added a nice isometric view. So this L-shaped building that he's considering, he wants to see how the 2 roofs are going to intersect with each other, and that view helps. If you know computer-aided design, you might draw a nice CAD drawing. This was drawn by a friend of ours, Mark Charles, and he has done a scale model in the 2D drawing. And if that's printed out at that scale, you actually can use it to cut your wall lengths right from the drawing. Now I'd like to talk a couple minutes about how we figure out the additional materials, because there will be some that the kit does not provide. So as you think about the type of foundation, if we go with a simple cement slab, usually sheet styrene or basswood will serve. If you're looking for cement block or brick for your foundation, rail scale models has some nice etched materials in multiple scales. A structure on pilings, typically basswood strips would serve for that. And if you want stonework, there are lots of different options, Plastruct and others that have a nice cast sheet or embossed sheet with 3D pattern. There's some photos, you can study those later on. Each of those has a place in the types of models we might be building. You will need some roofing, again, not provided by the one kit. So think through, are you going to put a peaked roof or a sloped roof? You want something fairly substantial for your undersurface, styrene, basswood. I really like mat board. You can get that at an artist supply like mine. It's just under 1/16 of an inch typically in thickness, and it's fairly stiff. You do want to seal it so prevent it from warping, but it's a good material to work with. Your rafters, exposed or boxed in, shingles, Clever Models offers some paper shingles. There's also Campbell and others offer the pre-cut shingles. With evergreen products, you can make metal roofing or roll roofing that often is duplicated with classic masking tape technique or paper. And some photos of the various roofing types. Corrugated is another one that you can consider. And the details. We've mentioned that the one kit does not provide chimneys or additional window treatment beyond just the framing. So I won't go through the whole list here, but you can read that at your leisure. There's a lot of different possibilities. And as you're planning out your kit build, you will want to consider all of these so that you have the right materials on hand when you start. And just some final thoughts on working with this particular kit. You really don't have to think that you need to use all the materials in the kit to create a single structure. You could have smaller structures with some parts left over, or you could probably get 2, even 3 smaller structures out of this kit. On the other hand, you might want to take on a really good size project that would require 2 or more kits. It's up to you. We do recommend that you don't finalize your design until you have your kit in hand so that you know exactly what you're working with. Again, we have not seen each of the scales. We're familiar with S scale version, but have not seen all the others. So, and we are not thinking of this as a contest. I know some of you might be wanting to come up with a really grand scheme for something very impressive, but we want to celebrate everybody's creativity and modeling skills in this. We don't know the skill level of everybody out there, but we want everybody to have fun with us, to do something that is kind of unique, but don't feel that you're having to compete with each other. So we are about to wrap up introduction part 2. Here are the dates for the build. There's actually a fair amount of downtime here from today to when we start the build, over a month. That gives you time to get your kit, to really think about what you'd like to build with it, to obtain the other materials that you'll need to finish it, so that we're all ready to go. These are a week apart once we get rolling. So your assignments for out of tonight are to draw your plans up. If you haven't already, go ahead and order the kit. Also get the additional materials. Here's how to get the kit. And one final point, if you need help, if you have questions, if you have things that just are not clear, here are 2 email addresses. These are compliments of our friends at the S Scale Resource Magazine. You can reach Randy and me with these addresses. And that is the end of our pitch.
Well, Gaylord, Randy, I sure do appreciate it. I mean, that pretty well lays out a work schedule for the upcoming time period for modelers, and looking forward to your actual construction of the building of it.
Great.